ठीक। मैं स्टार्ट कर रहा हूँ।
ओके सर।
Namo Ramana. A very warm welcome to all the devotees of Raman Kendra Delhi for this evening's satsang with Raghav ji. Rajesh ji is at the shrine and I would request him to initiate with puja. Rajesh ji.
ओके सर। ओम श्री गणेशाय नमः, गोविंदाय नमः, रमणाय नमः, नाथाय शिवाय नमः, नमः शिवाय नमः, नमः शिवाय नमः, नमः शिवाय नमः। वक्रतुंड महाकाय सूर्यकोटि समप्रभा निर्गुण कर्मेदे सर्कारेषु सर्वदा। वक्रतुंड महाकाय सूर्यकोटि समप्रभा निर्गुण कर्मेदे सर्कारेषु सर्वदा। ओम भूर्भुवः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल। ओम नमः शिवाय 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 नमः शिवाय। ओम श्री रमणाय नमः हरि ओम। गणेशाय गोविंदाय रमणाय नमः हरि ओम। नाचला शिवाय नमः हरि ओम। I am going to recite the Ramana Stotram. अपार सच्ची सुखवारी राशोजस्वमी मात्रम भुवनम समसम गुहायितम तम रमणं गंभीरम चिंता विहीनम हृदय चिंतयामि। ओम आसेन मोसेन जाताय नमः नमः। ओम श्री रमणाय नमः। ओम गुरुवे नमः। ओम अखंड संविदाकार्याय नमः। ओम मोजसे नमो। ओम कानोद्वाय नमः। ओम जगद्हितावताराय नमः। ओम श्री भूमिवासतोदिताय नमः। ओम पराशर क्रोधंसाय नमः। ओम सुंदराय तपफलेनाय नमः। ओम कमये सुचारित्राय नमः। ओम सावन सायवते नमः। ओम श्री सोनाचल मौली मानसाय नमः। ओम सवनहस्काय नमः। ओम श्रीमदाशांस मासत्रे लब्ध विद्याय नमः। ओम मां शक्ति निपातेन प्रबुद्धाय नमः। ओम परमार्थ विदे नमः। ओम तीव्राय नमः। ओम पितृप्रदान वेशिने नमः। ओम इंदु मौलिना पितृमते नमः। ओम पितरादेष्टे शोणस्याप्ताय नमः। ओम तपोम्याय नमः। ओम उदासीनाय नमः। ओम महायोगिने नमः। ओम मोहसाय नमः। ओम कुशाग्रे नमः। ओम शांत संकल्प संसम्राय नमः। ओम सुसदृशे नमः नमः। ओम सवित्रे नमः। ओम स्थिराय नमः। ओम तपस्वी सवंगाय नमः। ओम फिलाम विच विलोचनाय नमः। ओम चंद्रिका चितहास श्रीमंडल नन्मंडलाय नमः। ओम शूतमार समासीनाय नमः। ओम शूरिता किलबिंबराय नमः। ओम वेद वेदांत अज्ञाय नमः। ओम शिवमुद्रे नमः। ओम तिरुगाते गाताय नमः। ओम विरूपाक्ष गुहावासाय नमः। ओम विराज चलाकृते नमः। ओम उदित नयनाय नमः। ओम पूर्णाय नमः। ओम ऋतल तांडवाय नमः। ओम गंभीराय नमः। ओम परमाचार्याय नमः। ओम सुप्रसन्नाय नमः। ओम अभयप्रदाय नमः। ओम दक्षिणेशाय निभाय नमः। ओम धीराय नमः। ओम दक्षिणाभिमुखाय नमः। ओम सवराजे नमः। ओम हर्षे नमः। ओम भगवते नमः। ओम ईड्याय नमः। ओम भू विद्या विशारदाय नमः। ओम विमलाय नमः। ओम दिव्यदर्शने नमे नमः। ओम आपताय नमः। ओम यजुर्मार्ग परचकाय नमः। ओम समदर्शे नमः। ओम सत्यदर्शे नमः। ओम सत्याय नमः। ओम प्रशांताय नमः। ओम अमित विक्रमाय नमः। ओम सुकुमाराय नमः। ओम सदानंदाय नमः। ओम मृदुभाषणे नमः। ओम ध्यानवाय नमः। ओम श्री सोनाचल अद्भुत स्कंदशम निकेतनाय नमः। ओम सदर्शनोपदेष्टे नमः। ओम सद्भक्त वृंद प्रवृताय नमः। ओम गणेश मुनि ब्रह्म सेवितांदि सोरस्याय नमः। ओम गीतोपदेश सारधि संशिष्याय नमः। ओम वर्णाश्रम मतातीताय नमः। ओम रसज्ञाय नमः। ओम सौम्याय ओम आत्मते नमः। ओम सर्वानिमत्सथा रामाध्याय नमः। ओम सरसद्गुणे ओम आत्मा रामाय ओम महाभागाय नमः। ओम आत्मुक्ति विदायकाय नमः। ओम वीनताय नमः। ओम विनुताय नमः। ओम विप्राय नमः। ओम मुनिंद्राय नमः। ओम पाकोजलाय नमः। ओम दशनादन सहायने नमः। ओम मोने स्वात्मबोधकाय नमः। ओम रचकांतिकर सन्नाध्याय नमः। ओम समना दंत मोचकाय ओम अंश मीचंडाशाय वे नमः। ओम संसारनावर्तकाय नमः। ओम शोनादि शत्रुदेष्टे नमः। ओम हार्द विद्या प्रकाशकाय नमः। ओम अविचलित निज प्रज्ञाय नमः। ओम नैसर्गिक महातपसे नमः। ओम कमंडलुद्राय नमः। ओम शुकोपि नव सेनाय नमः। ओम गुहाय नमः। ओम दंडपाने नमः। ओम कृपा पूर्णाय नमः। ओम भव्र विषज्ञाय नमः। ओम सकंदाय नमः। ओम देवतमाय नमः। ओम अमर्त्याय नमः। ओम सैन्याने नमः। ओम पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः। ओम श्री रमणाय नमः। ओम श्री रमणाय नमः। ओम श्री रमणाय नमः। ओम शिवाय नमः। ओम शिवाय नमः। ओम अरुणाचलाय नमः। ओम अरुणाचलाय नमः। ओम अरुणाचलाय नमः। हरि ओम हरि ओम हरि ओम। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम नमो शिवाय नमः। हरि ओम हरि ओम। I am going to recite the Updesh Saram. कर्तुरागया प्राप्ते फलम कर्म किं परम कर्म तज्जडम कृति महोदयो पतन कारणम फलम शाश्वतम गति निरोधकम ईश्वरापितम नेच्छयाकितम चित्त शोधकम मुक्ति साधकम काय मने कार्यमुत्तमं पूजनं जप चिंतनं कमा जगतीशदि युक्त सेवनम अष्टमूर्ति देव पूजनम उत्तमश्वा दुच्चमंदते चित्तजम जपे ध्यानमुत्तमं आज धारया सोत सासम सरल चिंतनम विरते परम वेद भावना सोहमिस्सो भावना विदा भावनी मता भाव शून्य से भाव सुस्ति भावना वाला भक्ति रुत्तम रिसले मने सस्ता किया भक्ति योग वदाश निश्चितम वायुरोधना लीते मने जाल पक्षिण दोध साधनम शित्वा एवं शित की आयुता शाक दोदय शक्ति मूलिका लय विनाशने उभय रोधने लयगतम पुने भक्ति नोमितम प्राण बंधन लीन मानसम एक चिंतनम नाश में देते नष्ट मानसो कृष्ण योगी ने कृतमस्ति किम स्वस्थितं यते दिश्यवारितं चित्तात्मना चित्तदर्शनं तत्त्वदर्शनं मानसं तु किं मार्गणे कृते नैव मानसं मार्गार्जवा वृत्त्यस्तः वृत्तिमाशिता विश्यो मनो विषयमने ऐम्यं कुतो भक्ति चिंतवते अयपतत्यहं निज विचारं ऐमिनाशिवा यममत्या स्फूर्ति हर्ष्यं परम पुरुष इदम अहम पदे अभिक्षमीन्वे ऐमिलीनिके अपल्य सत्य विग्रहेन्द्रिये प्राणदीत में नाहमेक सम तज्जनमसा सत्यवासिका चित्तवेतरा सत्यायिषि चित्यायं ईश जीवयो वेश दिविदा स्तस भावतो वस्तु केवल वेशहानते स्वात्वदर्शनम ईश दर्शनम सात्वरूपते आत्मसंस्थि स्वात्वदर्शनम आत्मनिर्दय आत्मनिष्ठिता ज्ञानवर्जिता अज्ञानहीन चेत ज्ञानमस्ति किम ज्ञातुमंतरम किम स्वरूप में आत्मदर्शने अव्याभव अपूर्ति सुखम बंध मुक्ति तम पुरं सुखम विन्दति ही जी वस्तु देविक एम पेतकम निजीवगानकम मैदिदम तपो रमन वागियम एम पेतकम निजीवानकम मैदिदम तपो रमन वागियम हरिओम। ओवर टू अनुराग जी।
Namo Ramana. A very warm welcome to all the devotees for the Sunday satsang with Raghavji. Raghavji, of course, has been with us for a few years now, and I do not think he needs any formal introduction. But as always, there are new devotees who join us. So, in the interest of the new devotees, I would just quickly introduce Raghavji. So, Raghav ji has been speaking to us on the earliest set of instructions given by Bhagavan in his own handwriting in the form of Vichara Sangra or self-enquiry, as preserved by Gambhiran Seshaya. This consists of a series of questions posed by the devotee between 1900 and 1902 and the handwritten answers by Bhagavan. Thus, the needs of diverse type of spiritual aspirants are addressed by Bhagavan, as the topics include both the core practices of self-enquiry as well as practices supportive or helpful for self-enquiry. And these are special answers in their own right, because these were the earliest set of instructions given by Bhagavan in his own handwriting. Raghavji is a devotee of Bhagavan with a background of Vedanta study under various acharyas of Rishikesh and Uttarkashi over several years. After completing a degree in technology in 1993 and a few years of research in electronics, he was drawn to the exclusive pursuit of the path of self inquiry. He was blessed to be closely associated with the Ramakrishna Mission, Harsha Vidya tradition, and the Adi Shankara Brahma Vidya Peeth. Since 2001, he divides his time between ashram in Tiruvannamalai and Uttarkashi, and he occasionally shares what he has learned from the acharyas with fellow devotees. I would now request Raghavji to please address us.
Namaste and welcome. We'll start with the Shanti Mantra. अपार सच्चित् सुखवारिराशेः यस्योर्मिमात्रं भुवनं समस्तं गुहाहितं तं रमणं गभीरं चिन्ताविहीनं प्रतिचिन्तयामि वन्दे श्रीरमणशेः आचार्यस्य पदाब्जम् यो मे दर्शयदीशं भान्तं ध्वान्तमतीत्य ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः. So in the previous class, we were studying Bhagavan's questions towards the last part of these very interesting 42 questions posed by Sri Gambhiram Seshaya, compiled as the Vichara Sangraha or self-inquiry in English. We will just revise a couple of other questions which we have already studied in the past, and then we will pick up the thread of those questions which we've been studying just in the last lecture. So it bears a repetition that Bhagavan always customized his teachings, keeping in view the student in front of him. And yet there is a thread which leads the student gradually back to himself. So while Bhagavan validated questions about creation, God, and so on, he would gently bring us step by step to come to self-inquiry, Atma Vichara. In most of the traditional texts and even the acharyas, they talk of three basic realities that need to be understood in order to be free from any distress, to be free from all limitation. And those three entities are I, world, and God. To put it simplistically, I, world, and God are the three topics which are dealt with extensively. And the Indian Advaita tradition, in which Bhagavan is our latest and most revered exemplar, draws attention to the fact that the solution, the breakthrough to understanding the entire gamut of questions related to oneself, one's purpose in life, what is the way to be free from distress, the main existential questions are all hinged on understanding what the I is. Otherwise, there is no end to the number of questions that one can ask and keep getting answers to regarding the world, regarding God or Ishvara. So, in Sanskrit, we say Jiva, Jagat, and Ishvara are what are inquired into. It's very legitimate to ask questions about all these three, but then the breakthrough, that insight which puts an end to all questions comes by self understanding rather than understanding either the Jagat, the world, or even Ishvara. Because Ishvara, if we start going into the depth of it, is infinite. All the details of how, for example, the divine creation starts, how it continues, how the law of karma works, these are endless questions. Krishna very lucidly tells in the Bhagavad Gita, Gahana karmano. If we start inquiring into the nature of karma, why did this happen either to me or to someone? One gets provisional answers, but then you will be left with some more answers, questions, which you will have to find answers to. And so the game continues, and the mind will continue to wrestle with one question or another. On the other hand, if following the guidance of the acharyas, the respected teachers of the Advaita tradition, and in our case, our Guru Bhagavan Sri Ramana, focusing on self inquiry puts an end to all questions decisively. We get very satisfactory answer. That answer which puts an end to all other questions. We get that understanding really. And so therefore, Bhagavan in the earlier questions in the Vichara Sangraha tells us how in understanding our lived experience, we move from questions about the world and God to recognizing consciousness, the truth of what I am, as the adhisthana, as the basis for all of existence. So while this might seem drastic, it is that which will give the final, clear, and convincing answer. So Bhagavan uses the analogy of a light kept in a box. Imagine this light streaming through a box. There's a lamp kept inside a box, and then there is an opening for the light to stream out of the box. So, this famous analogy of Bhagavan explains how consciousness that is here and now, you are already experiencing every moment that consciousness. It's an inside out process where consciousness is a priori, it's always there, it is you, and that consciousness streams out, as it were, to illuminate the physical body and then the rest of the world as well. So, for the sake of visualization, you take consciousness in the heart, streams out through the senses, and projects this world for itself. But then, when it is clearly inquired into, it is found this entire world is not separate from consciousness. So this idea, which is called Drishti Srishti Vada, was what Bhagavan would lead people to before going further in saying that that consciousness which you experience every moment is the absolute truth. In being that consciousness, in understanding and appreciating that that consciousness is non-dual, it is free of any blemish, I discover freedom. And so gradually I draw my mind in away from its preoccupations with various objects, with various entities in the creation, to come to that consciousness which was always there, like a light, as it were, illuminating the world. Initially, you can say it's a light illuminating the world, but then you notice that when you pay attention to that light, there is no world. The world is a superimposition upon that eye of consciousness. So that is a magical discovery. But then initially, all we have to do, turn the mind away from being preoccupied with various objects. As an intermediate step, one could say, focus on the mantra, focus on one's relation to the Guru or to Bhagavan. So these intermediate steps are helpful. If they are working well, very good. And so all mantra repetition is validated in this method. You use this to draw the mind away from 100 different preoccupations. which have 100 different problems, conditions that come along with the problems. Instead, the mantra highlights that I which is free of those roles, that I which is inherently okay, inherently free of any faults. I, as a devotee, am always faultless in the eyes of the Guru. What a relaxation that is. Otherwise, I am one way or the other laden with some guilt, some hurt. Remember, guilt and hurt are two sides of the same coin. Guilt is what I experience, a very unproductive but neurotic, meaning repetitive emotion that I experience because of things which I did or should have done but did not. My omissions and commissions lead to guilt. And then when somebody else has these omissions and commissions, that is hurt. So both guilt and hurt are what I am burdened with in all these roles I am playing to some extent or the other. But in relating to one's Guru, in relating to Ishvara through the mantra, I am able to come to that point in myself which is already relaxed, already free from guilt and hurt, already free of any tension. So that is a very helpful stepping stone to then coming to the truth of that I itself. So, in other words, you broadly have this two-step process where I am initially caught up in the roles I play, laden with certain burdensomeness, tediousness, frustration. From that, I draw back during the meditation, be it at least, to being just a simple, basic, relaxed person relating to Ishvara, relating to the Guru. And then further on, I come to that I am as limitless, non dual consciousness. So, this two-step journey is what the entire teaching is about, as evidenced in all these questions which Bhagavan has dealt with. So, Bhagavan, for example, says the self is like the lamp which shines of its own accord in the inner chamber. That's the cause of all that exists, the causal body. And then sleep is the door. So sleep keeps that light within yourself. In sleep, there are no objects. So whenever you think of deep sleep, by sleep is meant deep sleep, it's very helpful to appreciate, hey, I am happy without any objects. People normally would be afraid to think of giving up all objects, giving up wealth. So there is this binary conversation where one side might say one should give up wealth, one should give up all attachments. Another side says, no, 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 all these are very real. They need to be respected, they need to be dealt with. But then both these sides or both these views can fruitfully take cognizance of the experience of deep sleep. In deep sleep, I am willfully, very happily letting go of all objects, all my roles, all my loved ones, all my wealth. I am very happily letting them all go and looking forward to these few hours of deep sleep. They say you go through cycles. You have REM and non-REM sleep, but you do go through 3 or 4 cycles of deep sleep every night. And so deep sleep in the vision of Bhagavan is living experience that I am happy without any objects. You already have that experience. You're already a sannyasi in that sense, one who has dropped all his attachments and engagements with the world. Temporarily, you are a sannyasi in deep sleep if you recognize that. Sure, you again pick up all those things you left off on account of karma, on account of one's avidya or lack of self understanding. But still, it is helpful to dwell on deep sleep. So, Bhagavan says, deep sleep is the door. So, that's the innermost state where you experience yourself as you are really, with very little engagement with all the other entities. And then through the sleep, you come to dream and then wake. That's the inside out view Bhagavan represents. I slept happily. Says Bhagavan. And then due to karma, kala, etc., that deep sleep door either gets shut or it opens and creates this waking for you. So in this way, Bhagavan refers to the three states of experience, waking, dream, and deep sleep. And what is it that is continuous? What is it that is always present? You alone are present in all these three states. And that I am, which is continuously present as the background of these three ever-changing states that I am, is limitless. It is not limited by any of those states. It doesn't change. Consciousness doesn't change. The mind changes. The mind undergoes these states, avasthas. Consciousness, which is like the basis, the adhishtanam as we call it, is unchanging in these three states of experience. So how does this work, or can it be used? All I have to do is pay attention to that gap when you just wake up. One very helpful way of practicing the understanding of how I'm free from the three states of experience. So whenever you wake up every morning, spare a few minutes without rushing into your roles. Just a few minutes, stay right there. Be in that condition, that avastha where you're not fully awake and yet you're not sleepy. If you're able to just stay there and note what is there, just start to notice that that awareness is free of the roles it plays. Very helpful. It's very helpful to do that practice, be it even for a few minutes. The antarala avastha, that intermediate state, Bhagavan says, one can try to just remain there. If possible, when you pay attention, it stays a while longer. That itself is a very helpful meditation. Then again, another helpful meditation which employs these three states, waking, dream, and deep sleep, is when, let's say, anytime you are meditating and you just nod off. Very common experience. Many of us in Ramanashramam would see people with all sincerity. They meditate and then they might be nodding off. No shame. There's no shame in that because they are very relaxed. And the only relaxation they know is sleep. So the mind, which is a little relaxed by the grace of meditation and in the temple or in the shrine, they will sleep. They will just nod. But no shame. Why? Because when they just come out of that sleep state, it's still sattvika. They're woken up, so there is sattva. And so it is a meditative state. Maybe they don't know it. If not, they should awarefully wake up. Proudly, they should wake up from that sleepy meditation beat. They will, they will get great benefit there. So when they are trying to practice meditation and some sleep comes, remember, it's not easy to get sleep in meditation. The mind can go on becoming restless, thinking of all its worries. So if the mind is actually getting to a point of sleep, when a person is meditating, bless them, that's very good. But then don't stop there. As you wake up out of that sleep, which is during meditation, meditate. So just catch those few moments as you arise out of sleep, become aware, oh, I have just kind of slept or I'm in this semi-sleep condition. Don't blame yourself. Hold on. If you're doing mantra, then do the mantra. During those few minutes or moments, even as you kind of become awake and alert that I've just had a nod while I was doing meditation. So don't waste those moments. Don't look on those moments as wasted moments. They're still very helpful. And the other thing you can do if you're practicing self-inquiry, as you come to mindfulness during that meditation, you just had a nod due to sleep and then you woke up, do the self-inquiry there. Notice consciousness, which is free of the thoughts, free of anything that you do. All doership is gone in that particular state. You have dropped the role of being a doer. So you are already in a very powerful or very deep state of self-abidance there. All you do is note the point. You don't have to do anything. Just notice There is self-abidance in that state when you just wake up out of deep sleep, either in the morning or even in the flawed meditation be it, doesn't matter. It's not so flawed because you're utilizing that space. And so there you hold on, just stay there. By hold on, I mean just stay there. That is also very deep practice of self-inquiry. So having said that, we will just see now what Bhagavan is saying further on in the 31st question, which is the point at which we left off last time. So Bhagavan had earlier said that if we who are endowed with various thoughts meditate on God, that is the self, we would get rid of the plurality of thought by that one thought. So this is what I was saying, that all the different thoughts and roles that I play, I gently let them go through relating to Ishvara, God or Guru. And then further, I come to the self as consciousness awareness, which is non-dual, free of even any relating to Ishvara. That's the second step. But then the questioner here asks, how is one to think of the self? The questioner assumes, I should now think of the self in some way or the other. And Bhagavan clarifies there, saying, the self is self-luminous, prakasham, without darkness and light, and is the reality which is self-manifest, which means that nobody creates the self. Self-manifest means swayam bhavati swayambhu. It has always existed. There was never a time where it did not exist. The most amazing thing, which those who have not noticed this would find it incredible, is that you are eternal as you are. Even as a person with, let us say, avidya, without even self knowledge, you are eternal. You never die. The body dies, but you cannot die. No one has created you. The big difference between the theological traditions, where each of us is created by God. Well, here Bhagavan and Advaita say, God has not created you. You are always present. You are as real and as co-evil in your status as Ishvara or God himself. Consciousness is neither created nor destroyed. You have always been there. And so it is Swayambhu. You have always been there. Then why am I still here? Because self-knowledge wasn't there. Each life we have been iterating the same experiences over and over again. We perhaps did not have the interest in self-knowledge, the interest in someone like Bhagavan. So for the first time, we have now come to connect with our Guru Bhagavan, who was teaching us the highest truth of non-duality, Advaita. And so this is unprecedented. We may not even know this, but really, most people who come to Bhagavan and start to appreciate Advaita, well, that's unprecedented. In the revolutionary journey across many lifetimes, it has never happened before. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. We would have completed the journey. So we can definitely feel a tad happy about it. We don't have to feel low and feel, oh, I'm no good. I'm not able to master the mind or any such thing. Nil desperandum. We have come to Bhagavan for the first time. When I say Bhagavan, I mean Advaita, not just a personality whom we are having a cult. It's not like that. We love Bhagavan as our Guru. The Guru is one who removes avidya, who removes ignorance. And so we have come to this teaching of Advaita and we can stay put. This is the first time it's happening, so no doubt our habits die hard. The old habits will take some time to dissipate. The old habits born of thinking this world is very real. Oh my God, I will suffer. Oh my God, I am subject to all these problems. So that old habitual thinking will take a little time to weaken and dissipate. But till then, we can say we are with what is true. We are able to at least slightly appreciate the truth that the self alone is real, all else is changing and not really there. And so Bhagavan says, therefore, one should not think of the self as this or that. So you don't try to form another concept about the self. Why? The very thought of thinking will end in bondage. So the more we try to make a concept, oh, this is the self, we'll be drawn away from the self because you are already that. So this is very subtle here. In all other forms of meditation, you might stay with a concept, which is fine. If I say Om Namah Shivaya, it's a word, it's a mantra, and there is a certain meaning. It's a kind of concept, we can say. Nothing wrong with that. It's perfect, beautiful. And yet, when it comes to the self, I don't try to form or highlight or reiterate or repeat a concept. I don't keep saying, I am the self, which is non dual. I don't need to repeat the words there. Instead, what Bhagavan says is that the purport of meditation on the self is to make the mind take the form of the self itself. In other words, if I try to just gently drop the mind, drop the thoughts and the thinking patterns, I just rest as myself. That's sufficient. So all I have to do is develop this subtle skill, which I just mentioned, the gap between deep sleep and then when you wake up, or the gap when you even meditate and go to sleep during the meditation, no problem. When you just wake up, that's the time, very fruitful time there. So in different ways, there's just two methods. There are many methods like this by which you can effectively start embodying Bhagavan's teachings. So by these different, let's call them practices, of self-inquiry with some slight, no doubt, personal variations when it comes to how you practice it. What does one do? The mind takes the form of the self. Remember, the mind takes the form of any object that you think of. When you think of a tree, the mind takes the form of the tree. When you think of, let's say, a stone, the mind takes the form of the stone. When you think of your relative, your mother, your father, wife, child, the mind at that point takes on the form of that particular person. Here, what is to be done? You actually allow the mind to fall back into the self. You don't think of the self. There's a small difference here because the self is not an object. If the self were to have been an object, then you can say, I will think of the self, and then the mind will take on the form of the self. But that's not possible. The self is the very subject which is doing the thinking. The self thinks of the mother, the father, the flower, the stone, the tree, and so on. So, how do I think of the self? Bhagavan says, you don't have to. You don't have to and cannot, in fact, think of the self. Instead, you just rest as the self. You come back to being the self, letting go of all other thoughts. So, that's the subtle practice here, really. That the mind, you make the mind take the form of the self. This is the crux of the entire self inquiry method. The same beautiful method, self-inquiry, is taught by Sri Krishna Bhagavan in the Gita, 6th chapter, where he says, Atma says that make the mind Atma Samstam Manaha. Make it Atma Samstam Mana Kritva means make it. So there is a certain subtle direction you're giving to the mind. So just come back to being the self. And so if this sounds abstract, remember what I just said. When you just wake up from sleep without thinking of any thoughts, just stay there. Notice how I am. There are no thoughts. And I am, and I'm comfortable. So that's the recognition. Recognize without not too many words there that I'm comfortable just being myself. Anytime in any practice, when there is a little silence, a little absence of anything particular to do, see if these words ring true for you that I'm comfortable just being myself without thinking or doing anything particular. That is the excellent starting point where from there you take off and abide as the self. So that's just the starting point. Going deeper, you very naturally rest as the self. Atma samstam manaha. Atma samstam means as the self you are situated. The mind abides, as Bhagavan would say. So make the mind take the form of the self. In the middle of the heart cave, the pure Brahman is directly manifest as the self in the form I. Can there be greater ignorance than to think of it in manifold ways without knowing it as aforementioned? So Bhagavan is rhetorically asking the question. When the self is always experienced here and now, I am. So why do I have to think of it again? Thinking is about objects, not about myself. I am. That's sufficient. Staying with even the meaning of the word I am is also the most powerful or deepest meditation there. So the next question, the disciple follows up on that and asks, it was stated that Brahman is manifest as the self in the form I in the heart. To facilitate an understanding of the statement, can it be further explained? So Bhagavan had used the word heart, and that is where this consciousness or I is first manifest. So the student is asking, can you please explain more about how this I awareness is first manifested or experienced, if you like, in the heart? So Bhagavan says, is it not within the experience of all that during deep sleep or swoon means falling unconscious, there is no knowledge whatsoever? That is neither self knowledge nor other knowledge. Afterwards, when there is experience of the form, I have woken up from sleep, I have recovered from the swoon. Is that not a mode of specific knowledge that has arisen from the aforementioned distinctless state? So Bhagavan is here saying that, see, first you are just you are just a beingness. You are just I am. And then when you wake up, you experience I am a thinker, hearer, doer. So all these other entities and other roles come into the picture. But first, I just am. I am existence, pure awareness. At that point in deep sleep, none of these other objects are there. It is distinctless state, says Bhagavan. It is because it is Eka Rupa, it's of one form. There is no change in deep sleep. There are no different vrittis coming there. And then what happens? The specific knowledge is called Vijnana. When you wake up, you get Vijnana, meaning tree jnana or stone jnana or your mother jnana, father jnana, wife jnana. All these other things start coming up. And then you start doing things. These are all called Vijnana. Just your nature awareness never changes, doesn't go. It is evident more clearly in deep sleep. It's there even now, but mixed up with the other objects. So it is called Vijnana, Vishesha Jnana. Vijnana means Vishesha Jnana, means specific, particular Jnana, because it is mixed up with the object. So in waking, I have consciousness plus objects. In deep sleep, there is just consciousness. To be precise, we have to say consciousness and avidya is there, because otherwise you wouldn't wake up as an unenlightened person. But for now, just stay with this idea that in deep sleep there are no other objects. That's correct. And then the Vijnana, this specific knowledge is called Vijnana. What is Vijnana? Remember, consciousness mixed up with the objects. This Vijnana becomes manifest only as pertaining to either the self or the not self and not by itself. So in the waking state, this consciousness with one or the other entity is either an object or it is the practice of self inquiry itself. In other words, in the waking state too, you have two types of vijnanas, Bhagavan is saying. One vijnana is you get totally lost in the objects. Another vijnana, waking state is, let's say you're practicing meditation. You're practicing to start with mantra and then come down further to just being with the self. So you're training your mind to let go of all the objects, all its preoccupations, come around to just being awake, you're not sleeping, but being the self alone, just pure awareness, noticing the absence of any objects, noticing I am free of all roles. So it's not another vijnana, in another object there. So Bhagavan is therefore saying these two vijnanas are there. In the waking, I can either think of objects or I rest as the self alone. That second is what Bhagavan wants us to practice or go towards. So Bhagavan is saying this vijnana becomes, yes, when this vijnana pertains to the self, it is called true knowledge. Knowledge in the form of the mental mode whose object is the self, or knowledge which has for its content the impartite self. So this is, of course, in English it sounds a bit abstruse, but it is quite straightforward. If you know the Sanskrit words, Bhagavan is saying here, the akhandakara, the impartite means part means breaks, or that which is having all kinds of different entities, and impartite means akhanda. So Bhagavan is saying the mental mode whose objects is the self, or knowledge which has for its content the impartite self, the akhandakara vritti we call it, or brahmakara vritti we call it. That Bhagavan is saying is the vijnana we want. The other vijnana, where I get lost in the objects, it's not of use for me. It's just stagnation. You don't may not be anything wrong or bad about it, but definitely it's not going to help us come out of samsara, come out of sorrow. And so when it relates, when the vijnana relates to the not self, meaning the objects, it is called ignorance. So this is the summary of Bhagavan's self-inquiry method here. So when you wake up, the mind, due to its past habit, starts getting involved with the objects. Instead, if you stay with the self, that is the akhandakara vritti. Can I have the akhandakara vritti even while I'm doing all other activities? Not immediately. That itself is the goal there, sahaja samadhi. But still, you can start to practice it initially for a while. So you have some time restriction, no doubt. But then ultimately, that will become natural and spontaneous. So when you wake up, Bhagavan says that true knowledge in the form of the mental mode means vritti, whose object is the self. The Vishaya is the Atma. So Atmakara vritti, Akhandakara vritti. That is what Bhagavan is talking about here. And so, if you practice that, you immediately come out of the preoccupations with the objects. So, Bhagavan goes on to say that this state of this vijnana, when it pertains to the self and is manifest as of the form of the self, it is said to be the I manifestation, aham spurana. So, this is what in Bhagavan literature we often find the word aham spurana. So, as you can see, Bhagavan equates the akhandakara vritti to the aham spurana here. They both are the same. So, aham spurana has a certain immediacy to it. The I spurana means in English spurting. You use the word spurting like a fountain spurting. The same word spurting in English is derived from the Sanskrit origin spurana. So spurati. So that I spontaneously spurts out. It's always there. It's that which is always there. But then when you pay attention to it and just relax into it, this aham spurana is the state or the vritti there. That is what is called the akhandakara vritti in traditional Vedanta. So the state of this vijnana, yes, this is done. This manifestation cannot take place as apart from the real. So that akhandakara vritti, the aham spurana is one with the self. It takes you just there. Once the this aham spurana happens, as you abide, just relax with it, you just, even that aham spurana subsides and aham alone remains. So it is this manifestation that serves as the mark for the direct experience of the real. So mark means that is the indication. So the aham spurana takes you directly to total jnanam. It serves as the mark for the direct experience of the real. Yet, this by itself cannot constitute the state of being the real. Remember, aham spurana is also one step short of just being the self as a sahaja, as a spontaneous permanent abidance. That is why this cannot self constitute the state of being the real. So that's why it is the final stage. Aham spurana is, or akhandakara vritti is the final stage upon which, when it is spontaneous and natural, that is what Bhagavan goes on to say, that is the knowledge or prajnanam. So Bhagavan goes on to say that depending on which this manifestation takes place is the reality which is called prajnana. So Bhagavan is just using these words to convey the depth of self-inquiry. He first says there is vijnana. Vijnana means you have either involvement with objects or just the akhandakara vritti, aham spurana. These are the two types of vijnana, Bhagavan says. So through this aham spurana practice of self-inquiry, or if you want to use Vedanta, you can say nididhyasanam. By this nididhyasanam, the basic reality, prajnanam, is arrived at. You stay there. No more aham spurana also is required. So that basic reality, Bhagavan gives it the name prajnanam here. And then goes on to quote the Vedantic text, Prajnanam Brahma, teaches the same truth, says Bhagavan. Know this as a purport of the scripture also. The self, which is self luminous and the witness of everything, manifests itself as residing in the Vijnanamaya Kosha. By the mental mode, the vritti, which is akhandakara, impartite, sees this self as your goal and enjoy it as the self. So, this akhandakara vritti practice is inherently joyous. If at all we can use the word, we can say it leaves the impression, the samskara of ananda in the mind. So any other practice can be burdensome. Somebody can ask the question, how long should I practice this? But if by the grace of Bhagavan and God, you have this glimpse into the akhandakara vritti, it's not a burden. You will never complain. How long should I practice the akhandakara vritti? The reason is, it's like saying, How long should I be happy? That's a meaningless question. No one will ask the question, okay, so how long should I be happy and will get the jnanam? Doesn't matter. The practice itself is joy. The culmination is natural joy, which is not even a practice. That is prajnanam here. And so therefore, seize the self as your goal through this mental mode, which is impartite, meaning the akhandakara vritti or ahamspurana. Using ahamspurana, you arrive at the self and enjoy it as the self. So enjoy is particularly relevant here. It is a path which begins and ends in another. Unlike let's many other paths which can be burdensome, which can feel strenuous. Here it is joy to start with and joy natural to end. That is the beauty of this path of Vedanta, which Bhagavan is teaching here. And then the next question we will read and then stop for today. What is that which is called the inner worship or worship of the attributeless? Attributeless means nirguna. So, what is the nirguna upasana? Says the questioner. And Bhagavan goes on to ask, nirguna upasana, by the way, is just the same as practicing the ahamspurana, but with some slight difference, as Bhagavan will indicate. In the texts such as Ribhugita, the worship of the attributeless, the nirguna, has been elaborately explained as a separate discipline. Yet, all disciplines such as yajna, dana, tapas, and niyamas, observance of vows, japa, yoga, and puja are in effect modes of meditation of the form I am Brahman. So now do you see how Bhagavan is coming to Ahamspurana and saying that same practice is actually there in every other practice implicitly. It's not very easily highlighted there. But this practice of just being the self is there in every other practice as well, but less obvious. It is implicit. So the modes of meditation of the form Aham Brahmasmi is there in every other japa, ayagnya, dana, tapas, and so on. So in all the modes of disciplines, one should see to it that one does not stray away from the thought, I am Brahman. This is the purport of the worship of the attributeless. So in all the other worship too, Bhagavan is saying, you can just continue to pay attention implicitly that I am that self, I am like the witness. That witness consciousness need not go away. I can be there as well, even in the other practices. So that is the purport here. So Bhagavan, as you see, mentions the Ribhu Gita, one of his favorite texts so beautifully. Ribhu Gita leads us to Nididhyasana. That is why Bhagavan mentions even chanting the Ribhu Gita continuously is Nididhyasana also. And then the 34th question is the 8 limbs of knowledge, the Jnana Ashtangas. So the question is obviously already very well read, perhaps more so than what is required, one might feel from the questions. Because sometimes having a free mind with not so much scriptural concepts pre-existing makes it easier to clearly understand things. But nevertheless, here the grace of Bhagavan, so not a problem. What are the 8 limbs of knowledge? Jnana Ashtangas. So in the tradition, we have the Ashtanga Yoga of Patanjali described in the Yoga Sutras. Now there are also what are called the Jnana Ashtangas, where in the well-known text called the Aparokshanubhuti, Sri Shankara, or rather one of the later acharyas, maps the Ashtangas into different aspects of Jnanam itself. So he gives a different twist to all the Ashtangas. If you remember, we had discussed Ashtanga Yoga in one of the earlier questions. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. So here, each of those words in the Jnana Ashtangas is given a Jnana significance. It's no longer about doing asana as in, some particular yoga posture. Pranayama will not mean another breathing method or breath work. So the Jnana Ashtangas are the same words of Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga mapped into Bhagavan's or the Jnana Yoga method. So let's see how Bhagavan explains this again very beautifully. The 8 limbs are those which have already been mentioned, that is Yama Niyama, but differently defined. Yama, this is controlling the aggregate of sense organs and realizing the defects that are present in the world consisting of the body. So here Yama means I see the defects in the different objects that I may take to be very real and desirable. Vishayeshu darshanam. So any object which is occupying my mind overly much, I see as a defect. I should not obsess about it because it is based on some falsehood. Remember, it's not prescriptive. It is saying that if you see an object to be what it is, you're fine. But if I see the object to be what it is not, I attach exaggerated importance to an object. That is the problem. And so in Yama, in this form of Yama, I try to see an object for what it is without ignoring the defects that are there in that object. So that is Vishayeshu Dosha Darshanam, realizing the defects that are present in the world consisting of the body and so on. So why Bhagavan said body is a person, let's say he obsesses about his body, its shape, its weight, even its health, too much of worrying about health, etc. Well, one sees the defects in that. It is counterproductive. We are not being asked to reject everything and be a kind of recluse here. We're just saying be objective. 100% objectivity, that's excellent. That's in line with Bhagavan. So yama is that, seeing the defects in the objects. Next, niyama. So in the tradition, the Patanjali's tradition, niyama is to practice something. You get up in the morning, or you do some fasting, or you do some sense denial. Very awarefully deny yourself some things that you like, and just observe the resistance. So it's a kind of playing with your mind and senses to get freedom from their habits. That is niyama, observances. So here, what is it? Bhagavan says, Niyama is maintaining a stream of mental modes, means vrittis in the mind, continuously maintain some vrittis that relate to the self and rejecting the contrary modes. In other words, it means love that affectedly for the Supreme Self. So here Niyama implies that continuously my mind dwells on the self with a certain love, with a certain joy. So here, perhaps it is still short of jnana, but it is still a useful practice. The reason is, if this is jnana, you don't need to practice this. So this is one step short, but is leading to self-knowledge. So you practice a stream of thoughts in uninterruptedly of love for the self, meaning you just derive joy just by being with the self, being as I am happy. And then asana. What is asana? That with the help of which constant meditation on Brahman is made possible with ease is asana. So, in other words, someone once asked Bhagavan, what is the best asana? And the questioner assumed Bhagavan would say Padmasana or Sukhasana or Vajrasana and so on. Bhagavan saw the mind of the aspirant there. He saw that that person is still stuck with this fiddling around with the body, manipulating it, doing all kinds of gymnastics, and he just is too obsessed with the physicalization of asana. And so Bhagavan gives him a push. He says the best asana is nididhyasana. Nididhyasana means maintaining a stream of thoughts on the self. So it is very similar to yama, or similar to niyama, but here it means that you are abiding in the self more deeply. So asana is the help of the constant meditation on Brahman, that is nidhyasana, which is made possible with ease. That asana is called asana, says Bhagavan. That's the real asana. So what is the best asana in Bhagavan's words? Nidhyasana. And then next, what is pranayama? Conventionally, breath control. But here, what is it Bhagavan says? Rechaka is removing the two unreal aspects of Nama Rupa from the objects constituting the world body. Puraka is grasping the three real aspects, existence, knowledge, consciousness, and bliss, which are constant in those objects. And as Kumbhaka is retaining those aspects, thus grasp. So these, don't worry too much about the words. It's quite straightforward. Pranayama conventionally is what? You inhale through the right nostril, exhale through the left nostril, inhale through the left, retain and exhale through the right. This is called inhalation puraka, retention kumbhaka, exhalation rechaka. So here Bhagavan says, what is rechaka? Letting go of air. But it is letting go of the names and forms. Namarupas are negated and you stay with the what is known as asti, bhati, priyam. So any object, when you see it, it has these 5 aspects. It is existing, it is evident to me, and it evokes the pleased person. It has the capacity. May not be always, but it has that capacity. So any object, therefore, in the tradition, Bhagavan is already using the lingo of Vedanta. Any object, you stay with that Satchit Ananda or Asti Bhati Priyam aspect, or that is the reality of the object, and reject the Nama Rupas as Mithya, as not real. So removing the 2 unreal aspects, Nama and Rupa, rejected. And then that is, and retaining the real is called Puraka. Rechaka, getting rid of Nama Rupas in your understanding. Puraka, retaining the Satchit Ananda. And then Kumbhaka, staying there permanently without trying to disturb it. So he does this kind of discriminative practice as pranayama, a very interesting higher definition of pranayama. Is a famous verse in the Saraswati Rahasya Upanishad, quoted by one of the later acharyas in a text called the Drishya Viveka. This Asti Bhati Priyam Rupam Namam Che Tamsha Panchakam Artatriyam Brahma Rupam Jagat Rupam Tatodvayam. So he says this whole world is Asti Bhati Priyam Namam and Rupam, 5 aspects. So the whole magic of Jnanam is retain Asti Bhati Priyam, means existence, knowledge, and limitlessness, and reject Namarupas. Bhagavan is paraphrasing that here, saying pranayama is like that, he says. Finally, pratyahara. This is preventing name and form which has been removed from re-entering the mind. So you stay there without uh, swerving from that condition where you're just with consciousness as I am, without again getting into the objects, without thinking of other objects. Then dharana. This is making the mind stay in the heart without straying outwards and realizing that one is the self, which is existence, consciousness, bliss, Satchidananda. So dharana in the Patanjali tradition is desha bandha chittasya dharana. So you try to focus on one location. And so Bhagavan, as one might expect, says making the mind stay in the heart, Hridaya. The Hridaya, remember, is not only the physical location which you point out towards the right side of the central part of your chest. The Hridaya is also the canvas on which this entire world play is being projected. So whenever you think of Hridaya, based on the context, it means both the right side of the heart, that's the central aspect of what you are, and yet it is also the background, the canvas on which this entire Vishwam is being projected. Vishwam Darpana Drishyamana Nagari Tulyam, as the Dakshinamurti Stotram says. So whenever you hear the word Hridayam, think of the mirror analogy. There's a mirror in which there's a whole city seen inside the mirror. Really, there's no city, it's just the mirror that is real. And in the analogy, remember, ignore the actual city. Normally, you have a city, a mirror. Inside the mirror, you see the reflection of the city. Now, we are going to use the analogy of that mirror in which you see a city. Ignore, for the sake of the analogy, ignore the actual city. Assume it's not there. Just a mirror with a city you see inside it. You feel there's a city inside that. Like animals, like monkeys, they don't know they are seeing the reflection. They just see the mirror and they see another monkey in there, right? So, like that, you see the mirror and you see a city inside it, correct? Even so, consciousness is the mirror. In that mirror of consciousness, you are seeing this entire world. That mirror alone, consciousness alone is real. The Nama Rupas you see, not absolutely real. So that understanding, staying where it is, dharana, says Bhagavan, staying in the heart without straying outwards. Then dhyana. In Patanjali, dhyana is the 7th limb, Ashtanga's yoga. In the Ashtanga yoga, dhyana is the 7th limb. And this is meditation of the form, I am only pure Chaitanyam. That is, after leaving aside the body, which consists of the 5 sheets, one inquires, who am I? And as a result of that, one stays as I, which shines as the self. So now you stop worrying about the nama, the rupa, rejecting what is not real. You are already very clear and firmly abiding with the real. So that is dhyanam. By the result of rejecting the body and all the 5 sheets as not I, what remains, as a result of that, what remains, that which shines as the self, you stay with that. That is dhyanam. And finally, samadhi. When the I manifestation means aham swarana also ceases, there is direct experience, or this is called samadhi. So in just before samadhi or during the practice of dhyana, you can say aham swarana is there. Then finally in samadhi, which is natural samadhi, the aham swarana also subsides. Within samadhi, you can say aham swarana initially is there, but then as it completely becomes spontaneous, natural, that is the samadhi which Bhagavan is talking about here. He says the I manifestation, the aham swarana also ceases. There is subtle direct experience. This is samadhi, says Bhagavan. So very interestingly and beautifully, Bhagavan connects the Ashtangas of Patanjali with these 8 limbs of self-inquiry, the Jnana Ashtangas. So of course, there is so much, you can say, depth we are giving. Since we shouldn't too much elaborate these, I'm giving you just a certain basic outline here. But for sure, stay with this two-step method where you draw yourself away from other objects and stay as the self. It's not as difficult as it sounds. Even you take one step, you get a lot of help. Many people think it's very difficult, but the moment they even take a few steps, take some efforts to stay with self inquiry, immense help comes from within, from Ishvara, from Bhagavan. So one should not get too overwhelmed saying this is too difficult for me, because these are the words of Jnani, and they will have an effect. When you have that attitude, these words of the Jnani are a pramana. They are living words which will definitely be true 100%. Of course, I need to understand them clearly. I need to reconcile some of the words which are in different places and contexts. But for sure, this method will greatly benefit us. Remember, the knowledge in the form of the words of Bhagavan is a pramana. It's also giving us knowledge. And one needs maybe some help in the form of reconciling all these words to make it a very coherent and a clear understanding for us. But then the words of Bhagavan are the pramana which will give us knowledge of Brahman. That is why Bhagavan says, Prajnanam Brahma is the truth. So Bhagavan culminates his teaching in that very Vedantic aphorism, Prajnanam Brahma. So with this, I will stop today. And if there are any questions, I'll take them. Otherwise, we'll chant the Shanti Mantra and conclude today's session. Anuragji, you can we can now take the session forward if you are there. I'll chant the Shanti
Yes,
Mantra and we'll conclude.
yes, sir. I was just checking on YouTube if there were any questions. I do not find any questions there, sir. So thank you.
So we'll chant the Shanti Mantra. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om.
Thank you, sir. As always, it is very kind of you to address all of us, and on behalf of the devotees, a very warm gratitude and thanks. Sir, since Narayananji is not well and Mr. Krishnan is also not at the shrine, would it be possible for you to chant Manamalai with us, sir?
Yes, I'll organize that in a minute.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Arunachal Shiva, Arunachal Shiva, Arunachal Shiva, Arunachal Arunachal Shiva, Arunachal Shiva, Arunachal Shiva, Arunachal 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 Shiva, Arunachal Shiva,
अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचल अहं भून्दीप्तं अहगुहैशिरया കൊല്ലരുണാചല ആരെ ശ്രീടിൽ അഖിലം പഴിത്തിടും അരുണാചല ഏ പഴിത ഇനിടുവാൻ അരുണാചല പുരിമോ ഇതുപോലരുണാചല ഉനയെ മാറ്റി ഓണത്തിരുപ്പാൻ അരുണാചല ஓர் சோற்றுளம்பிடாதுனை கண்டடங்கிட பொன்னழகை காட்டருணாச்சல என எழித்தே போதனை இதுவோ ஆழ்மை அருணாச்சலம் ஏனிந்த உறக்கம் என்னை பிறழிக்க இது உனக்கழகோ அருணாச்சலா அகத்தினில் புகும் போதகத்தில் நீ இளையோ அருணாச்சல ஒருவன முன்னை ஒழித்து வருவார் உன் சோதே இது அருணாச்சலா ஓம்கார உனையார் அருணாச்சல ஔவை போலென உன்னருளை தந்தனை ஆளுவதுன் கருணாச்சலா கண்ணுக்கு கண்ணாய் கண்ணின்றி காணுனை காணுவதேவர் அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல.
Namo Ramana. Once again, a very warm thanks to Raghavji and Madam for uh, for a for a wonderful session of satsang and Akshar Manamalai. We shall reconvene in 2 weeks' time. Namo Ramana.